And as well as that, we're going to have a chat opened up. Okay, so welcome everybody. I will be admitting people as they come along, and again, we're here as part of, this is what we call it's a legislative guidance series that we're doing. So we do one on a monthly basis, and this one is about effective safety supervision. I won't say on every, but on most accident investigations, there is a significant failure in terms of supervision, and effective supervision could, play a major part in reducing accidents, injuries, damage, etc. So it is a very, very important aspect of safety management. And I suppose when we're talking about effective supervision, we're not just talking about it from a safety standpoint. So, you should be looking at it as well from other standpoints, be it quality or whatever the case may be. But it all leads into the same, good effective supervision in the required discipline or area will make a significant difference to the outputs from the workplace, the outputs, be it productivity, be it quality, be it safety outputs, etc. So, again, this is webinar based. We're going to make it as quick as we can for you, and also do a Q&A at the end. And it is available afterwards for anybody who wants to get a copy of the presentation, which Ashley will send out to you, and also a link to it online. And you can also look at the previous ones we've done throughout this year. So, safety supervision, we're going to look at the legal requirement. What does the law say or intimate in terms of the requirements with regard to supervision? Why supervision fails. We've all been supervised by somebody who hasn't got this, that, or the other, or we've all seen somebody in a supervisory role doing things the wrong way. We're just going to group the key elements of why supervision fails, from starting with how come they get put in the position in the first place to being in that position. Then we're going to look at the key fundamentals of effective supervision. So what makes an effective supervisor? And we're not coming up with anything new here. It's actually, it's written down for years. People have got different views on what's important. We've got 4 key elements that we concentrate on, but that's just our view. We're going to show you a couple of different versions on that. And finally, we're going to look at the management of supervision, supervising the supervisors. Again, it seems to be lacking a lot. Not that it isn't there in name, but in practice, is it there? Are supervisors being supervised? And are those supervisors who are supervising supervisors being supervised? So it's part of your management system in terms of to ensure the effectiveness of it. You have to have effective management. I will do a Q&A at the end. So what does the law say? So we've taken extracts from the guidance documents than the letter of the law, because the guidance documents from the HSA, are more user-friendly in terms of understanding. So, managers and supervisors have a direct responsibility for the safety and health of employees and activities under their control. It's not ambiguous. It's very straightforward. Managers and supervisors have a direct responsibility. Anyone who's into safety or have followed the change in legislation, and in particular the 2005 Act when it came in, the significant change in that Act was accountability, bringing supervisors and managers to account. And companies had to provide an organizational chart to show how people are managed and job roles, and that had to be detailed within the safety statement. So that's the first area we concentrate on, that supervisors have a direct responsibility. I suppose it's better to just quantify what a manager and supervisor is by definition. A manager or supervisor is a person who supervises people, processes, or people and processes. Yeah, so people or processes or people and processes. So experience in applying skills and knowledge is an important ingredient and needs to be gained under adequate supervision. Makes sense? So we get someone new into the job, they are gaining new skills and knowledge to do that job, and they have to work under appropriate or adequate supervision. Now, obviously, if somebody is working where the risk levels are low, the level of supervision should, doesn't have to be as high. Whereas let's take an electrical apprentice where they're working under supervision. The supervision has to be very, very, close to them, and also managing what they do in terms of applying their skills and knowledge. We've often heard, sometimes a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. Absolutely, if it's applied incorrectly or dangerously. Proper supervision helps to ensure the development and maintenance of competence. So competence is having sufficient training, knowledge, and experience appropriate to the activity that you're engaged in. So proper supervision helps to ensure the development and maintenance of competence, and it's particularly necessary for those new to a job or undergoing training. I mentioned the apprenticeships or even someone starting a new job. We can't make assumptions that because they've done it X before, they can do X now, because doing X before could be in a different environment with different equipment, different situations. Doing X now could be totally different. Day-to-day communication from supervisory staff that reinforces the information communicated by other methods. So on a day-by-day basis, supervisory staff are reinforcing safety measures, quality measures, effective controls that are in place, and the legislation is requiring that to be in place. Review performance to remedy failures, to implement workplace precautions during routine activities. First-line supervisors and other managers should be reviewing people's performance and addressing any gaps in performance or gaps in knowledge, skills that need to be addressed. And don't wait for an incident or issue. It should be predetermined. It should be proactive, not reactive in the workplace. Some training needs may have to be met through closely supervised on-the-job experience. Again, I think I've just outlined that earlier. That sometimes you do have to be very, very closely supervised because of the nature of the risk. It is important that employees are provided with the opportunity to apply their training and that supervisors ensure that they apply their training as intended. People signing up for a course, sending them on a course, they come back, right, you're trained now, so off you go. No, the supervisor should monitor them to make sure that they're following the training. And this becomes an issue from, let's say someone's gone away on forklift training, which is very, very good. A novice 5 days, or experience could be 2 or 3 days, or refresher could be 1 day. And when they come back into the workplace, the supervisor, should be looking at them to make sure that they are complying. Now, if the supervisor doesn't know the key elements of how to drive a forklift safely, how can they supervise that? How can they tell if the forks aren't placed correctly on the ground so as to avoid somebody inadvertently tripping or getting their foot trapped under the forks as they walk by? So it's important that, and we go back to it later on, that supervisors have competency in the area that they're supervising. So why do individuals get promoted? Now, some of these you might laugh a bit at, but I think I've experienced most of these throughout my time. So why did they get employed? Yeah, well, they get promoted because they're very good at achieving results, and they do it by cutting corners, quality, costs, safety, etc. But they get there, yeah, and their class says, yeah, they'll be a great supervisor because they get output. But they're not, because at some stage it's going to crash. Someone's going to get seriously hurt, or quality is going to be dropped, or a customer is going to be let down because maintenance wasn't done on equipment, etc. So it's not that effective. Puts their career, opportunities, promotion, etc. above the needs of the company. Yeah, we all know these ones. Yeah, they'll stand on you to get up and do whatever they have. So they're not building people up as individuals to work effectively in the workplace. They're just interested in how can they get up the ladder. Treat the team like a vessel, slaves, servants. Yeah, and it happens, still happens today. Do not listen to those who have hands-on experience of the job. Instead, they dictate that a task has to be done the way they want it to be done. Yeah. Now, I think I could have been accused of that in the past myself, having a very, focus, this is where I want to go, and no, that's where I want to go. But yeah, you have to take people into account. Now, sometimes you do have to take a strict route, but you have to justify that. You can't do it just by doing it. You have to justify that. Take credit for others, for the work of others, So it doesn't bring the credit to the team. It's all, I worked hard and I did it, and but no, it was me. That's not a good supervisor, because he won't gain or he or she won't gain the respect of staff. They may be a niece, nephew of a company owner, senior manager, or large customer, a golfing buddy, etc. Yeah. How did they get the job? Well, it's Ireland, so this one knows that one, and they got the job. Yeah. Does that mean they're going to be a very good supervisor? Well, yeah, you could be lucky, and they could have the appropriate skills, knowledge, etc., etc. But in most cases, they don't. In most cases, they don't. They're the longest person working in the area. Should we have to give it to them? No, you don't. Not if they're not going to be good at what they do and going to cause difficulty. There's no one else, so let's give it to X, Y, or Z. And the last one here is the person recruiting them has poor recruiting skills and doesn't, task them or check them as to their abilities, etc. They're common pitfalls. But what about when someone gets the job? What are the pitfalls when someone gets the job? Well, supervisors not being proactive and continually reacting to safety issues as opposed to being proactive. And I've said it to lots of people. We come and we look at accident reports or incident report or good saves, near misses, all of these fancy things that record details of incidents, accidents, etc. And when you see things that are repeated and repeated and repeated, why are they going on the list? The objective of the list is to identify what the issue is and prevent it from happening again, not for it to happen 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time. Because if it happens 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, the solution in the first place was incorrect. So we have to be proactive, not reactive. Like a trip hazard, removing it and putting it in the bin, that doesn't solve a reoccurrence. Finding out why somebody's putting it on the ground and how can we prevent them from putting it on the ground, that solves it. And that becomes a management and behavioral issue. Having poor interpersonal communication skills. An effective supervisor needs very, very good communication skills. To talk to their staff, to talk to management, to talk to suppliers, to talk to contractors, etc. Very, very good. And if it's poor, well, then people will be reluctant to engage with the individual. Whilst they may be well-intended, their poor skills could adversely affect the quality of supervision. Reacting badly to issues brought up by employees, taking things personally, barking back at them, whatever the case may be. So people are scared to actually bring an issue. And again, an issue is an opportunity to correct the issue or address the issue. An issue left unaddressed can become a bigger issue. Slow to address even basic safety issues or concerns. And this is where somebody brings up an issue and they just don't address it. Listen, these gloves that we're using here, they're just falling apart with this new product we're moving, and they're really not effective. They'll be all right. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. So we're only doing this for the next 3 or 4 weeks. You'll be fine. That's not what an effective supervisor would do. Poor delegation of tasks and expecting perfect results. So if you are delegating, you need to be aware of who to delegate to, what their abilities are, and more importantly, what they have difficulty doing, so that you don't give them something that they're going to have difficulty or not be able to do correctly. So you manage your expectations by effectively delegating. Not competent in the works they're supervising. They haven't worn a t-shirt. So they have to have a certain level of competence. Obviously, as you go up the line, the competence will in terms of the what we call micromanagement level of competence isn't required, but you still have to have a certain level of competence. Again, I get the issue of the person not understanding what the rules and safety rules for using a forklift are. If they're not competent to do that, then they can't effectively supervise that. Not following through on promises. So, and that affects the morale of staff and affects the I suppose, reaction to staff. When staff are needed to get a rush order out, or whatever the case may be, well, because they've been promised and nothing, well, they're likely not to roll in behind the supervisor to dig the company out in a situation. Not practicing what they're preaching, giving out to people for not wearing this, the glasses, the mask, or whatever the case may be, and then walking through the workplace without the glasses or the masks themselves. It's not good. Not treating everyone fairly, having a favourite or two that they allow get away with different things, yet they'll chastise another person for doing something that one of their favourites is doing, and there isn't a problem. So again, that creates more issues in the workplace. Not consistent with their decision making, like the weather. Today it'll be a yes, tomorrow it'll be a no for the same question. And that doesn't help staff, understand the ways of a supervisor. Like a good supervisor, you know the answer before you ask the question because they're very consistent. And fairness is going to come into it now as well. Not paying attention to the work activities. I suppose that's not keeping up to speed with where things are at. So when a question is asked, they know exactly where it is. Well, the reason that's down is because the delivery this morning is late. It's due at about 11:30, but we have people preparing for that. So hopefully we pick up that time later on because we've worked ahead of ourselves. That's been on the ball. Whereas an ineffective supervisor, finds out that there's something wrong when a senior manager finds out there's something wrong. And that's not being on the ball. Again, this is not up to date with status of work issues. Again, that's kind of linked. Casual management style. There are places for casual management styles, and they are fine, but you have to have the key competencies and key skills required to carry that off. Some people have it, but don't have the skills to match that. Being unpredictable, we have that one. Not being commercially aware. Commercial awareness is very, very important in terms of, let's take a company that makes a net profit of 10%, which is quite healthy if you can manage 10% profit, And let's say there's something in the workplace and it hasn't been managed correctly and it's damaged. It's €1,000 going to cost to replace it. But the supervisor could have prevented that by effective management. But that €1,000, in terms of profit, you've got to turn over 10,000 to get that 1,000 back effectively, because that's 10,000 that you weren't going to spend. That now you have to 1,000 you weren't going to spend, but now you have to spend. So the supervisor is not commercially aware. So don't worry about the instead. We can throw them away. You got to be very careful in terms of commercial awareness. And in today's marketplace as well, the cost of materials, the cost of equipment, the cost of downtime is significant. So supervisors need to be commercially aware. Is easily stressed. So, and some of the older people might remember Dad's Army and Corporal Jones and the don't panic, the least bit of excitement that ever happened. So same way in the workplace, you need somebody from a supervisory position who is level-headed to a degree and reacts appropriately given the nature of the situation. So another issue that we're going to look at with regard to why things are fail for supervisors is what we call the consequences of reinforcers versus punishers. So if we look at reinforcers are consequences that increase the frequency of the behavior. So positive reinforcement, the effective supervisor reinforces the desired behavior. And how do they do that? By acknowledgement, by recognition. And that helps reinforce. Now, when there is a negative situation, it should be negative reinforcement. And the effective supervisor withholds negative criticism but looks at solutions to address. So look at identifying supports to address the issue for the individual, as opposed to being negative or demeaning or whatever the case may be. On the opposite side, punishers are consequences that decrease the frequency of a behavior. So positive punishment, the ineffective supervisor punishes undesired behaviors by doing something perceived to be unpleasant. For example, a poor performance appraisal, a verbal warning, or increased workload. Now, having said that, there are times that that is needed, but it's how it's done and what gets you to that point. When I ever got to a situation of a poor performance appraisal or a verbal warning, the person across the table acknowledged it before I did. Because we had taken the steps beforehand, and not gone straight to it. Again, and that's I suppose, a process people can adopt. Negative punishment. The ineffective supervisor would withhold recognition that is perceived as pleasant or positive. So withhold a bonus, stop a promotion, etc., as a negative punishment. And people may have experience of all that. So let's look at the positive sides. What is a supervisor's role first? Well, the supervisor bears the greatest responsibility and accountability for implementing the safety and health program, because it is him or her who works most directly with the employees. And their role includes providing employees with the tools they need to do their job, providing employees with the training they need to do their job, helping employees to set goals to improve their performance, being a competent resource for the employees, so they can go to them about any issues or concerns in the workplace, or advice or guidance, holding staff accountable. This is a big role. Demonstrating safety leadership. So demonstrating by example, being an effective communicator. So people are very, very clear in terms of the communication, the methods of communication and the process. I suppose what I've taken so far has been from the textbooks and the guidance. We've kind of taken it from a practical side and look at it from what are the key skills that we would look at. So the 4 key skills are competence, has walked the walk, has good interpersonal skills, knows the workforce's competencies, what they're good at, what they're bad at, what they need help with, etc. Is proactive, is thinking ahead, is planning ahead, is working ahead with the individuals. Diligent, knows exactly the status of work issues, etc. that's under their control. Is commercially aware and acts accordingly. Fair, deals with everyone the same. And when they're dealing with somebody, they adopt a fair response approach. And I don't know if you've heard of the fair response approach. Most people would say, well, okay, how would you like to be treated yourself? Oh, that's too soft. Well, it may not be too soft, but a fair response means that you're listening, you're taking everything into account, and you're coming back with a reasonable response to the individual. Consistent. Decisions are predictable. That's when you know someone's consistent. They're predictable. So when you ask a question, you know the likely type of response you're going to get. Now, this was taken from an OSHA, an American safety organization, and they did a thing on supervision, and they had what we call 5-star supervision. And it gives a little bit, repeats what we've said, but in a little different way, which I found quite nice. So supervision, so overseeing work activities to make sure employees are safe, training, conducting safety and task-related training, accountability, insisting everyone complies with the company's safety policies and rules, resources, providing physical resources, tools, equipment, materials, etc., so employees can work safely, support, providing a supportive psychosocial work environment that includes schedules, workloads, recognition, etc., so employees do not feel under too much stress in the workplace. So again, we're just reinforcing what we said earlier. So management of supervisors. As I said at the start, a supervisor needs to be supervised, and a supervisor's supervisor needs to be supervised, etc., etc. It is very, very important. And what are the rules? Well, the same. They need to be competent, they need to be diligent, they need to be fair, and they need to be consistent, as well as the other things that we talked about. But I think those 4 key skills are if they have them, we'd be quite happy. Ideally, a supervision policy should be in place in the organization that outlines how the supervision process works in the workplace from top to bottom. And top management should prioritize effective supervision and have a review process in place. Now, the problem we have is that you can have people that are effective supervisors, but they may not have the resources in place to assist with that. And that's where you have to, I suppose, look not just at supervision. Have we everything set up in place to effectively put a good supervision process in place? So what is a starting block? Well, a starting block for that is an effective roadmap for the work environment. And what does that have? Well, a comprehensive operating procedures in place. So, there could be 3 operating procedures, 5, 6, depends on the activity the person is supervising. But are they comprehensive? Are they effective? Are they appropriate? Are they current? Yeah. Are they inclusive of everything they need to be? Yeah. So is that in place? Because that's the roadmap that they have to supervise on. Is there effective risk management controls in place that's referenced into that operating procedure, which you have risk assessments and control measures associated with that? Have training needs been identified and actioned? And people always, and this is where sometimes there's errors. People sometimes focus on what we call statutory compliance. Well, we get your induction, we get your fire safety, get your manual handling, we're happy. But what about task-related training? What about sign off on a process or procedure? They're taken through it and you get active sign off. In actual fact, in some cases, you should do a practical evaluation that they're doing the steps correctly and sign off by supervisor and individual. Because that's the roadmap that the supervisor is following. That's the rules that the supervisor is trying to enforce. And if the employees haven't been taken through that, they may have been here, sit in the corner there when you start, and there's the 25 procedures you've got to read. Could you sign it? You've read them all. Thank you very much. You start Monday. Again, that's, the supervisor's then left, well, hang a second, I've got this guy starting Monday. What do they know? Where are they at? Or do we just throw them in and they learn by example, experience, mistake, etc.? Build accountability into all levels, staffing levels and supervisory levels and management levels. And you manage that by monitoring and measuring the arrangements that are in place, by having effective monitoring and measuring arrangements in place. So it's been quite brief in terms of this lecture on effective supervision. The key fundamentals are that the individual should be competent, diligent, fair, and consistent. It's important that they have the ability to effectively supervise and are given the resources. And it's very important that the organization has a method for managing the supervisory process. Because if it can be managed effectively, it definitely can reduce risk in the workplace. It definitely can contribute to improved performance, which can improve quality, safety, and reduce costs in the workplace. So we're going to move to a Q&A now. I'm going to take it off record, and we're going to open it up for stop recording.